Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, I've got Jordan back in the studio with me once again. As many of you know, Jordan is an airsofter, a member, one of our Discord moderators, airsofter from Northeast US. He's been attending a lot of different events this summer, and he's been attending, in particular, the StagOps event series. He was here last time talking about Midsummer Nightmare, and today we're going to be talking about Operation Scapegoat, which is a Tier 1 StagOps event, which Jordan will explain to us in a second. Before we dive into the meat of the episode, I do want to point out that it came to light today that there's been some regulation changes in the United States about pyrotechnic grenades and how they are, how they now require a permit to use. They were previously exempted, and now they are not. This was a regulation exemption change done by the ATF, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but if you are an American listening to this and this is something that you care about, I would encourage you, just as we have done here in Canada during Bill C-21, to not just complain about it online in communities where everyone agrees with you, but actually write your members of government, whether that's your Congress people, whether that's your senators, find out who they are, send them a letter, send them an email, call their office, be nice, be respectful. The people who you're talking to, the people who are reading your messages, firstly, are likely not your congressperson and your senator, at least initially. And this is their job, right? So be respectful, but also be very firm in why this is disappointing to you and what changes you would like to see in the future, and be clear on those expectations. Being nice doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice on your values. We were very polite. We were very kind to the people we worked with, and we got the kinds of change that we wanted here in Canada. So if you are an American, my advice to you is absolutely go ahead and do that, and make sure that you voice your opinion. Maybe nothing will change, but if you don't voice your opinion, guaranteed nothing will change. So there's my dad advice for you today before we dive into the podcast. So Jordan, let's talk about Operation Scapegoat. So I did a little bit of research before the podcast, as one is wont to do, and I understand that this is a unique game mode in that it's almost like a round robin, so to speak, where you have multiple teams of 5 players who will do the same mission in different areas of the map, and they're all connected in some way, which you can talk about. But basically, the whole idea is all of those teams perform all of the missions sort of in a rotation until all the teams have completed all of the missions. And then once all that is done, you basically come back together, and then whichever one was, I guess, the most successful gets to take the lead on another sort of final mission that influences the course of the game. So it was really interesting. So I'm wondering, like, first off, how did that all start out for you? Because I understand that these Tier 1 events are also different from other StagOps events.
So the way that this event goes, and the reason that it's called a Tier 1 event is not because the people that are there are Tier 1 airsoft operators, the best of the best. Like, that's not what this is supposed to be. Like, we're all just people that play dress up in the woods. We're all the same.
Right.
But the way that you get invited to these events is there's a couple of ways. By participating with StagOps for like helping with events, so like setting up, breaking down, helping them out pre-season before an event. Maybe you're going to a map and helping them set up, or scoping out an area, mapping it out before the event starts for any changes that might happen. So assisting the StagOps staff in any way. But the main way that you get invited to it outside of helping them out is by another way of helping them out, which is by doing after action reviews, posting reviews on Facebook, participating, sending in pictures, contributing to the games. Because when they have a game and people think, hey, I think this could be better, a lot of times people don't ever talk to the event promoters about like, hey, how can we improve this? They just have their complaints or things that they don't like about it, and they keep it to themselves. And then next year, maybe it happens because they didn't talk to the people that actually run the events to fix it. So by doing these after action reviews, by giving actual honest feedback to Gordon and the rest of the staff at StagOps, they are able to make the events in the future better based on player information, player feedback. So we got invited to this event actually after I had sent Gordon the last AAR that we did for Midsummer Nightmare, I had sent that to Gordon. I was like, hey, this is our after action review. I posted it where they normally post them. And Gordon was ecstatic about it. He's like, wow, this is some of the best information that we've gotten, best feedback about our event. And not just best as in, wow, this event was amazing, but usable feedback, actual things that they can act upon, and getting it from a player's perspective. Because as staff, you don't get to see that. You don't get to feel what the players are feeling all the time. You don't know how a certain event felt to them when they went into it. You might think it went great, but players might have other things that they think could be run better.
Yeah.
And without talking to them about it, they will never know. So we got an invite after that after action review that I had made about Midsummer with you on the podcast. And the way that it works is you get invited. Gordon gives you X amount of time to confirm if you have 5 people to bring, including yourself. So me and 4 other guys from the pairs, one that was outside the pairs, we brought them in. I confirmed that they could make it to the event. Gordon gave us a ticket link, which was just a passcode to access the tickets that were locked behind a code. And once we bought all of our tickets, we were confirmed for the event. And that's how it worked for the 25 people that were on the player team. I'm pretty sure it was one, maybe a couple of people got invited. But once one of them said yes, they had to confirm they had 5 people. They got a code and then they were added in. So it was 5 individual cells of 5, being that there's only 25 players at this Milsim event, a training exercise. It was very small compared to most StagOps events. So 25 players, ideally it's 25 staff as well. And the idea is that you go into it, just like you said, round robin, but I don't know if it was really a competition for us there. We haven't gotten the scores back yet. I know Gordon's working on it, but I think it was a way to, see how each team, because they had a judge that would like follow you around, who was your briefer before the mission. They briefed you on the mission and then they'd observe at a distance to watch what you do, to see if you failed, see how you accomplished the mission. If you accomplished the mission, if you died and have to restart, they will be judging you based on that. And it wasn't a, hey, well, these guys are obviously the best. Look at all the scores they got. They completed every mission, but more so a way to see like, how do these people, when presented a problem, come up with a solution? And you didn't have a lot of time. It's not like you had a 2-hour period to do it. So you had 15 minutes of briefing. In that 15 minutes of briefing time, you had to coordinate with your squad to figure out what you were going to be doing. And you had 30 minutes to execute and finish the mission. So it wasn't a whole lot of time to do what you needed to do. You had to keep moving. And that was part of it. Gordon talked a bit about how when faced with challenges, a lot of airsoft players will get stuck. They won't be moving. They'll be in cover. They won't be advancing. But what you should be doing is bounding movement, moving forward with your team, providing suppressive fire, like not getting stuck in the same position. And this was supposed to be you are forced to keep moving forward. If you don't, you will fail the mission. And it's not just, did you complete the objective? You could complete the objective and not exfil, and you will fail the mission, because it's like you missed your exfil window and you didn't get picked up. And now you're left in Bagritsnia or Kwazima, wherever we were for this event. So it was a test for us. The way that I look at it was, how can our group of guys overcome this challenge that's presented in front of us? And there was no right answer. It was many different ways to get to the same outcome, and how you work it. So that's kind of just a quick rundown.
It's interesting to me too, what you're saying about how many airsofters, when faced with a challenge, sort of get bogged down, right? They don't know how to proceed. And what's interesting about what you just described is that regardless of the challenge that you were facing, you always had clarity. So you knew this is what you need to achieve. And also, this is the time window in which you have to do that. So I don't know if you were given, when I was looking at the brief, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, you had 30 minutes to plan what you were going to do. So you're presented the briefing, you have 30 minutes to plan, and then your mission timer is 30 minutes total, right? So
15 minutes for planning and then 30 minutes for the missions. Yep.
Gotcha.
It's 15 minutes of getting to the location and setting up, but it was only 30 minutes of execution time.
Right. Regardless, you're going into that being like, we have a plan, we know what we need to do. And so I think in that type of situation, as a player, you're much more equipped to not get bogged down because you do know what you need to do. Whereas I think where what I've experienced anyways, where people get bogged down is situations where they're like, I'm stuck, I'm pinned, whatever, there's a challenge in front of me, and on top of that, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So I guess you get that additional clarity, and it's almost, it's like a scenario or like I hate to say a training exercise because it's certainly not training for anything other than airsoft, right?
Hmm.
Or at least it doesn't pretend to be, right? So that's really interesting. The thing I would say is this sounds like really, like it sounds very advanced, right? So it sounds like you can't just, well, firstly, I mean, the idea of being a renter and being invited is just out the window. But like, it sounds like if this was your first event, this would be a very challenging first time event. If you're like, hey, Phil's going to be down with the pairs, and you can take a spot. And it's like, I've never played a Milsim before. This would probably be a challenging thing to jump into.
Oh, absolutely. There was actually a guy there that for the first time ever did play airsoft. So he
Oh
got
my
invited by
goodness.
one of his groups and he stayed the entire day into the night portion. And for reference, we'll get into it later, but it was very
Mhm.
cold. It got down to like the 30s and it was supposed to get down to like 23 Fahrenheit at night. And that is freezing, especially when you haven't been doing it at all this year yet. And
Mhm.
it just kind of comes out of nowhere. But he made it through the whole event. At the end, he had actually won a raffle and he was in his car warming up. But the idea of it was, yes, this is not supposed to be an easy thing. When you're playing these events, specifically StagOps events, whenever you're playing against Red Team, you're playing against people that have played these fields, that have done this before, that are supposed to make you feel like you are somewhere you're not supposed to be. And I've always talked about this with Midsummer too. The
Mhm.
staff at Midsummer, there'll be like two of them and they'll wipe out an entire squad of 12, and then they'll just continue on in their day like nothing happened. Sometimes it's meant to be that type of challenge. It's meant to feel like you are at a disadvantage. And in this situation, was it extra advanced? I'd say, given the scenarios and the time that you had to execute, yes, that was the difficult part. If we were just given, like, hey, these are your goals throughout the whole day, you have 5 hours to achieve them, that's one thing. But when you're put into a time crunch and you're looking at your watch, like, okay, it's already been 17 minutes, we still need to complete this objective and get out of here.
Yeah.
And if we start getting shot at, that adds a whole another aspect of getting out of here in time. Time management, I actually found myself while support gunning becoming like the timekeeper as well, making sure that we knew how much time we had, how much time we've killed already. If we're getting stuck, making sure that we're continuing to move forward. It became a necessary portion. So
Right.
definitely not easy to walk into for sure.
So what was your event like? So I mean, obviously, typical event, you've got your pregame briefing. I know that at StagOps events, they're like 100% compliance is super important, because you're not just responsible. I think in these types of events, and we talked about this sort of in the lead up, you're not just responsible for like your own stuff, but you're responsible for everybody else's in your cell, like their enjoyment as well, because it's so small, it's so particular. If you have one person who's not aligned with everybody else, it can really throw it off for some people. So we could talk about that in a bit. But so you have the pregame briefing that they do all this kind of stuff. Then you hit the field and you're assigned your first mission, which is
Yeah, so we walked into our first mission. We were cell 3. I'm trying to remember what sector of the field we were on, but that's not important. There were 5 different sectors on the field. You rotated through them until you completed it, like we just talked about. But
Mhm.
we walk out there in our first mission. We had the guy start briefing us. He says, "All right, so essentially there is the National Guard. The National Guard was, and I might mess some of this up because there was a lot of information given to us. But essentially, there's National Guard protecting this person of interest who had serious financial information on how the ESOE, which is actually the group that I played as at the last event that we played at, which was Autumn Justice, they're essentially like a terrorist organization that's in the area. The person that we were supposed to find had information on the financials of ESOE, what they're spending money on, where it's going to, what they're in bed with, I guess is what you'd say, like who's on their side.
Mhm.
And our goal was to find this guy who was supposedly inside of a compound, get in without alerting any of the National Guard that is patrolling the area. And we were told that there was at least 2 groups of National Guard We weren't given a good number on how many there could be. They said there could be 2 each, there could be more. So they didn't want to say exactly how many we'd actually have to deal with. But the idea was sneak in or go in guns blazing, find this guy, interrogate him, get the information that he has. We were given a prop of like chloroform, a way to knock him out so that we could leave without him alerting the guards, and then extract without people knowing we were there, or with everybody dead. I think that's how the rules went. Either you kill everybody, which risked setting off an alarm for the entire field. So that's a thing to add to this. Certain sections had an alarm. If you were alerted, if they spotted you and you engaged in a firefight and you didn't completely wipe the enemy team on the spot, they could sound off an alarm, which would cause every single sector, not just yours, but every single sector on the field that had an alarm to go off, which would then cause the offending team, the one that you're fighting against, the opposition, to, I think they would change their respawn rules to make it seem like they were getting reinforcements. They'd become more alert. They'd be actively searching you out. So if you were there and they didn't know you were there, they knew that there was something going on and they were going to start searching for you. So if you set off that alarm on the part of the field, everybody else's life just got significantly harder when you did it. So we took the aspect of, let's do this quietly. Let's do this without alerting anybody. Let's get in there, get the information we need, knock the guy out, and then escape from the field, escape from where we need to. And we had 30 minutes to do this. So we took a look at the map. We're working with our team and we say, all right, we're going to take the high ground. We're going to get around this because we see that they're patrolling typically on a road that's to the left of the compound. They can go anywhere, but that's where we see them. That's where the roadblocks are. So we take the high ground and we're moving up high and we're evading enemy patrols until we get up above the compound right behind them. And there was a huge valley. Like it's probably like a 30-foot elevation drop, but it's pretty much straight down. You have to hold on to things while you're going down or you're going to hurt yourself.
Right.
So we sent everybody besides me, actually, we had sent down to the valley. I stayed up top overwatching with my LMG. And the idea was I can keep eyes on the patrols that are walking down the road. And I can alert my team if there's a patrol getting close so that we can either stop what we're doing or prepare for the engagement that we're about to have. So I was providing overwatch while we had Will and Matt push up to the compound. Edgar and Kyle were down there also facilitating with me so I could talk to them. We didn't use radios. We were in such a small group. It was only 5 of us. So, and radios, at least what we've experienced with them recently, is when you want to be quiet, sometimes those radios just don't want to be quiet and they start chirping and making static noises and everything. And that's not what we wanted to deal with. Since we were working in such a small group, we opted to not use radios unless we got separated from each other, in which case we would do it.
Yeah.
So get up in there, interrogate the guy. We avoid all protection or all detection. They had heard us at some point, so they came to look, but they didn't find us. And there's an aspect to this as well that I should mention. Within reason, if you hide, even if you're somewhat visible to these players, they will go along with the fact like, wow, that guy's really trying to hide right now. Awesome.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, because it's like, I've heard of like military exercises or whatever where and I guess the stakes are different, right? But, regardless, the analogy is the instructors or whatever are actively looking for you. And if your hiding place sucks, they'll be like, there you are. And then just like, kick you out or do whatever. So they do play, I guess, unless the alarm sounded, they're playing along with sort of
essentially
like there was an attempt, right? It's like, okay, that's good enough kind of deal.
Yeah, so we're in an airsoft field where there's not always great cover everywhere. A lot of it is just like skinny trees and some dips and stuff. So if they really wanted to find you, we're in a small area. So if they really wanted to find you, they could just spread out and walk the zone and they'd find you every single time. But they're trying to suspend disbelief that these people are, they have excellent crazy vision or they're actively looking for you. Like as if you're walking through the woods, you might not notice somebody that's laying prone trying to hide. Like they might, as long as the camouflage is good enough, they might be well hidden enough that you wouldn't see it. Since they're not alerted, they're not actively searching you out. They will allow them to be like, all right, they're trying really hard to hide right here. It's obvious. We haven't seen them yet, so we'll let them go. So there was a couple of times where the patrols would come up pretty damn close to us. And there was one that almost blew our cover where they came up actually behind my position. So I'm up on the top of the hill and they came up behind me and I noticed them probably when they were like 75 feet away through the trees and I just hit the ground as low as I could And the way that Gordon described it is like you get to the ground, you put your face in the dirt, in the mud, whatever it is, and do your best to hide. And, they'll, if it's obvious that you're trying your best and you're in a decent spot, like not in the middle of the road, then they'll probably pass you by. So these guys came up really close to seeing us and we all hit the dirt, stayed quiet, and then they moved on. So we're about 23 minutes into this now. We need to get out of there. We don't have much time at
Do you
all.
think they saw you? Like in reality, like do you think they saw you?
They heard us. They had
Okay.
heard something, and I think they went to go check it out. But where I was, I don't think they could have seen me. Like
Okay, cool.
I could be like, yeah, man. I mean, I was definitely hidden. But when I saw them, I was through enough trees that I could hit the ground hard enough that if they were looking for movement, they definitely would not have seen me. And I was
Gotcha.
camouflaged well enough where I was. Woodland this time of year over there was amazing. All of like the pines still have all the greens on them. So dark greens, and then the wet ground was dark brown. The woodland camouflage blended in perfectly over there. So
God's plan, baby.
gotta love it. So we were looking at the time. We were like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. We're about to run out of time. We had like 5 minutes. So they chloroformed the guy in there and essentially said like, be dead or be out for this amount of time so we could extract without him alerting the guards. Pulled the guys up out of the hill. As soon as we avoided patrols, we let them know like, come up now. We ran up the hill and we started making our way towards extract. And I think we had about a minute left when we saw the point was called Sofa Chair, which I'll send you some pictures where you can see it says we were at Sofa Chair. That was our extraction point, just past it. So we were going towards it. And as we start coming up on Sofa Chair, we're probably like 10 feet away from it. We see the National Guard walking up the road directly towards us. So we're like, oh man, gotta go. So instead of engaging, we just ran through that intersection and we were just gone. And afterwards, we came back to like, yeah, no, you guys escaped. Like, we only saw you like as you reached the extraction point. So you guys are successful. You guys made it out. So we're like, sweet.
Cool.
They didn't alert us, nothing like that. And we completed our first mission without firing a shot, without causing an alarm, without getting a true alert. And we felt pretty cool after that.
Yeah, I would say.
Very wet, very muddy, very gross ground. A couple of steps in, I went like up to my knee in muddy water. I'm like, oh, thank God I wore my gaiters today, which I wasn't going to do because it was so cold. I'm like, the ground's probably frozen. It was not. It was absolutely not frozen.
I mean, there's something to be said, right, about airsoft games where you don't actually fire a single shot, right? Like, yeah, you have that intense sort of experience where you're doing something really, really cool, and airsoft is almost secondary. Like it's a bolt on. It's kind of like when we're talking to the guys who do like the Star Wars LARPs. Like the airsoft is the add-on that allows you to do the gun battles if you need them, but sometimes you, like in your case, you don't need them. And I think to piggyback onto that, like I would also add that when you think about like military exercises and stuff like that, I mean, caution is super important because you don't, unlike in airsoft, you don't want to get an engagement if you can avoid it, right? Because that just is less dangerous, I would expect. And so with this, like it encourages you to take that same mindset, because if you go in trying to fight against red team, like you were saying, they're really good and they know the environment, they're probably going to wipe the floor with you, right?
Yeah, and if you're not in the right position and you are not ready for that fight, and you pick it at the wrong time, you're probably dead. And that's how it should feel. Another aspect to add to this is if you get fully wiped, if you die, you can respawn. You can choose to respawn as a group, but you have to restart the phase completely. All of your progress goes out the window. So if you die 10 minutes in, okay, you can run back, speed run the beginning. Maybe you can still extract and get out. If you die 25 minutes in, you're dead, man. Sorry, you failed that. You don't get to say that you extracted. You didn't accomplish your mission. So there was an aspect of it where it's like, oh, if we start going down, if we get into this firefight, we might not make it out of this. And we might fail this mission because either we took too many casualties, we can't leave anybody behind. That is like a huge thing. Like you cannot extract with a dead guy with you. Like you should all be alive. Or at least I don't think you can extract with a dead guy. You can't leave them behind. It added that extra level of intensity where it's like there is actually a stake here where if we all get spotted out and we die, we're gonna have to go back to the beginning, and then we're gonna be on borrowed time at that point. So it was that whole exercise for that phase was a total evasion exercise with us, which was really, really cool. because that's not normally what you do. But for Will, one of the guys in the pairs, he is all about sneaking and not being spotted to begin with. And he's like, "This is me. This is what I want to do. This is perfect." And we came out of it. He's like, "Yeah, that was pretty cool. That was
Yeah,
pretty cool." I'm like, "Yeah,
legit.
absolutely, it was."
So that was your first mission of the day. What sort of was there like a sort of a break in between while you're waiting for all the other teams to finish, and then you rotate to the next one? Is that sort of how that went?
Yeah. So the way it works is you finish the mission. So 30 minutes. Once that's done, you have to wait for the entire field because they all start at the same time. When you say like execute, the entire field starts their 30-minute portion. So after you're done that, there's 15 minutes of travel time to get to the next location, which is normally like right there, which is really time just for you to drink some water, eat some food, reload your mags and stuff if you had to. That's another aspect. You had to carry your stuff on you. So you had to have whatever you needed on you for the next 5 hours. You had to pack your stuff for it to make sense. And it was cold as well. So that was an aspect that we thought of prior, where we needed to have enough equipment on us to sustain ourselves, but not be so heavy that we can't wear the backpack the entire time.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge for some people. And it's a challenge for me. I carry way too much stuff sometimes, and I get away with it because I can drop it at a base. There was no base. You had to be responsible for all your own stuff this entire time. So 15 minutes of ending phase to travel to get to the next location and resupply. You had another 15 minutes of briefing and planning, and then execution was another 30. So in between each section, there's like 30 minutes, but really it feels like 15 because you start getting the briefing and then you got to go.
So what was your second one then?
Sure. So second one was a little bit different. This one was the ESOE, which was the team that we played before, the terrorist organization out of, I believe in the story of this, it was Europe. We were given notice that there was I'm not exactly sure. He was a contact that was working with ESOE, and he was just walking about the woods, like he was trying to clear his mind before he had to go into like a big meeting that they were going to be discussing whatever plans that they were going to be doing. So he was strolling through the woods and he had security with him. That was the ESOE security force. So our goal was to find the group that was walking through the woods, and we had like a patrol area. So locate the group, eliminate his security, take the guy that was the point of interest, bring him to a location and hold him there. I believe it was for 5 minutes while he was being interrogated. That was like our mission, was to keep him safe there and then extract. I don't think we had to take him. We just got to leave him at the location. The idea is you do it cleanly, you're fine. But if you mess up and you shoot that guy, he only has one revive and he is incredibly frail. So if you shot him by accident, which was one of our ideas at first, like, why don't we just wipe out the entire group? Because he could take off and run. And we didn't want to have to be chasing him through the woods, because if he escaped, then the mission was over. So we had the idea of like, well, maybe we can shoot him and then just revive him and it'll be fine. And the briefer was like, yeah, but if you do that, he'll probably be pretty upset, won't move unless you're touching him, and he'll be like mortally injured. So, critically injured. So if he is, he won't be working with you. You're going to have to do all the work if you end up shooting him to get him to the next location. So we're like, okay, maybe we don't do that. But how are we going to surround these guys to get into a position where if we start a firefight, they don't run away, they don't escape? So we thought it was going to be simple enough. Like maybe they're just all in a group. He's in the center, whatever. Of course, it's not like that. We get out there, we're skulking through the woods. We finally see movement through the woods. So we went, okay, we hear them talking. We get into a location and there's probably 150 feet between the guards and this guy. So there's some room. If we start firing and they get alerted, this guy could just take off and run immediately.
I mean, it makes sense. He was trying to clear his head. Like he needed the space, right?
Yeah, I mean, big guys with guns next to you probably won't help you relax.
100%.
You just need them to protect you. You don't want them to be next to you. So
yeah, that's right. They all run behind the president or whatever, right?
Pretty much. So that was supposed to be like his main security force, like guarding him while he was out there. So we're sneaking through the woods. We finally locate them, and we're hiding in this like bog, is what it felt like. We were surrounded by water. Like you look in front of you and you're like, I don't know if this step is solid ground underneath this water or if it's going to be just straight swamp and I'm going to get swallowed up by this. Luckily I tied my shoes real tight before we went out there to make sure I didn't lose a boot in some swamp that I would inevitably step in at some point.
Smart move.
Yeah, but it was not a good area to navigate through. And of course, they were on the road. We didn't want to be on the road because if we did that, we would just be out in the open exposed. So we come up to the side of them. Will is leading on point, and we get eyes on a security guard. And he's pretty far away from the group, but if you shoot him and he yells out that he's hit, then the rest of the guards are going to know. So we were in this like limbo state going back and forth of like, how do we kill this guy? How do we not alert them? And I was really hoping that Will would get up close enough so he could knife kill this guy and throw him into the woods, and they would never know. They'd never know that we had gotten him to alert the guards. But after a few minutes, we just waited for him to get as far away as we saw him get on his patrol, kill him at that point, and hopefully take that action to then attack. But as soon as we shot him, guards were alerted. Matt told me to go far left, so I just went sprinting through the woods far left while there was a full-on firefight going on with my guys that were in the main road area, and I was still deep in the woods, and I got up to the side of 3 of their security guards that were all around this guy, and they weren't looking at that angle, and I was just able to eliminate all of them with like a one long burst from my RPK. I was up so close on that guy that he had no chance to run away. So I got up there, grabbed him with my arm, said, "You're coming with me." The rest of my guys came through. I think Will had actually gotten hit and he got revived. So that's another aspect. You are all medics. Everybody has a band, or at least the medics rules were not explained to us in a way that we only had one medic. And an aspect to the event that Gordon made clear to us at the beginning, because I said, "Hey, is there a command that we have to report to?" And he said, "There is no command. There is nobody coming to help you. You are commandos. You are on your own. You have to make your own decisions, whatever you think is right." So he gave you that. That was enough to be like, all right, so whatever we need to do now is what we need to do to accomplish our mission. And we did it by each of us having a band on us. So if we went down, hand it to the guy that's coming up to run up to you, put it on you, and then you were good to go.
Yeah.
So Will had gone down. He got revived. We grabbed the hostage or the person of interest, and we started bringing him over to, I believe it was Charlie was the location that we needed to go, which was a pop-up tent. Brought him inside of it, and he got interrogated for like 5 minutes while we were holding guard on the outside. And then we were ready to extract, but we had like 5 minutes again to extract. We didn't have many places we could go. So we start heading in the direction of where we think we're going, which was a point called Zombie. We didn't end up at Zombie at first. We ended up at a point called Delta. And at Delta, there was a full-on firefight going on with another group that was like in the middle of a phase, and they started engaging us, not the group that was on our team, but red team started engaging us. And I was looking at them like, wow, these guys are really right in front of our extract, like right where we need to go, like really, really stopping us like this. We eliminated that group. And then afterwards we realized like, oh my God, Delta is not where we needed to go. So we just like encroached on some other nation's war that was going on. I'm sure they were not expecting us there at all either, because it was clearly. Suddenly there's 10 people you're fighting as opposed to the 5 before. So we had eliminated them, and then we were like, okay, we don't need to be here. So we had to hit the road really quick and figure out what direction we needed to go. We didn't know if we were past Zombie or if Zombie was further up the road. So we hit the road where we were supposed to be, and then luckily I have played at the field a couple of times, so I kind of knew where we were, and I looked down the road and I'm like, I feel like that's where we need to go. And we just started running down the road with our guns up. Finally, I see a glimpse of that sign. There was about 30 seconds left, and I went, "It's over here, guys. Let's go." So we start running, and I hear them all behind me like, we're coming, but I can hear them saying it while they're running. So it's like jumbled, like out of breath, because we're just sprinting to get to the extract. And we make it there just before like the horn goes off saying that's the end of the phase. And we're like, oh my God, we made it out. Like we extracted. We're good. Very, very close call. Super close. It's difficult when you don't want to just walk the main road, or your point is off the main road and then you have to navigate back to it. Especially when you're in a time crunch. Sometimes you pick a direction, you're like, this is where we're going, and that was the wrong direction to go. So
I want to talk about the other scenarios as well, but I'm just curious, like while you're doing that, obviously there are other groups doing their own thing. One of the groups that you helped out, I'm sure they were very, very happy about that. But like, so far you're doing great. Are the other groups encountering similar success at this point? Do you have any idea at this point in the game? You're probably focused on what you're doing, right? But like, do you have any sense what anybody else is doing?
Only if you see them while it's happening. So the group that was right in front of us, when we ran into them, which was like 2 minutes before extract time, they were nowhere near their extract point. They had actually taken a different route when it came to accomplishing that mission, and they ended up at the point that most people would start at. That's where they
Hmm.
finished at. But that meant that their extract was way away from where they were. So, as far as I know, no, they did not accomplish their mission because they didn't extract. But we don't know that. We're not given any of that information prior to the next phase. I don't even
Okay.
know how everybody really did. We'll only know once like the scorecards come out, and then we get to see like how did each team do in each phase. I don't know how detailed they're going to be, but I'm hoping there's some notes on like what the teams did, how they accomplished it, what challenges they came across, things that sprung up. But no, you're not given any information, and I think it's to keep the idea that you are walking into something that you are only going to get briefed on now, and you have to make up what you're going to do on the fly.
Yeah, and I mean that makes a certain amount of sense too. Keeps you focused as well. You're not worried about what you have to do 3 missions from now or how Team B struggled with, mission 4 or whatever. You're just
Mm-hmm.
like, whatever's in front of me, that's what I'm dealing with right now. So I
Yep.
can totally see that. So that's your second mission. And so far, I'm seeing a recurring theme here around person of interest, person of interest. What was mission 3 all about?
Mission 3 was not about a person of interest, actually. Mission 3 was a surveillance and destruction mission, which was what it was supposed to be. So there were 3 points on the map. I believe it was Echo, Delta, and SGP, I think is what it's called. I don't know what that stands for, but something like that. Just three points on the map that if you've played at this field before, you would know. And the idea was that there was ESOE training supposedly happening at these camps. So we were supposed to go in, photograph evidence that we'd find on site, and detonate the camp. So we were all given Enola Gay grenades, which may be more difficult to attain after this podcast. But we
Yeah.
had a box of them, and they gave us 3, so 1 for each point to detonate. So we took that and we said, okay, so what is the chance that we're going to get attacked here? What is the odds that there are enemy forces here? And the briefer said, well, this is supposedly an ESOE training zone, so the chance of you running into some groups of people is pretty high. And you don't know how many there are. There could be people at every training zone. There could be people at one training zone where there's like 10 of them, but you don't really know that. So we go in, start at Echo. So the way that it works is like we spawned here, and then there were a point here, here, and here. And then past the last point is where the extract is. So we opted to say, okay, well, at least let's try to go in order. It makes the most sense, and we'll be the closest to extract when we get there. So we arrive to Delta. We start taking a bit of a firefight. We detonate and take pictures of the evidence that we have there. And I'm really happy about this. I saw the contact as it happened, and I was able to eliminate the threat almost immediately after he started shooting. And then I got into the most powerful position I felt like I've ever been in like ever when I was playing. There was this overturned tree that all of the roots had held its dirt, so very very thick dirt, and I was able to get onto the stump of the tree, or the main body of the tree, while it was overturned, and climb up to where the dirt was. And I was able to be probably like 4 or 5 feet off the ground, just looking over the dirt with my saw at the next location. I didn't want to move from there. When my guys were getting ready to move to the next point, which was right in front of me, I was like, I really want to just stay here because I would have a good angle. Now, I wanted to stay with my group, and I was called back, so had to go. But super powerful position. I had Overwatch on like the entire next objective that we were going to. And in hindsight, I wish I would have said, listen, like, you guys move on the next point, but I'm going to be here to Overwatch, because in 2 minutes from then, we were in an engagement, and they were getting engaged from the spot that I was able to cover from that stump.
Oh.
So if I was able to be there, it would have been a non-contest. I would have just wiped out everybody. But we got into a heavy firefight at the next location, which was Echo, which at every milsim that I've been at this particular field at Harris Farms in Maine is a very difficult location to take. It is a bunch of different hallways all put together with a couple of doors, but they have this drapery hanging down over the doors, so you can't just see, but they can peek through the side of it. And, you have to hit through the crack, essentially, in order to hit these guys. So very difficult location to take. We took it from the roadside, which kind of left us in the open, and we started getting engaged before we got up to the building. My guys were on the right side, started to go down, and I think at one point I saw 2 or 3 guys down. Maybe it was just 2. And I was by myself on the left, trying to get an angle on where they were getting shot from. And
Mm-hmm.
the only way I can describe this is the big building's probably 100 feet in front of us, maybe 150. We're getting engaged by all angles from the north side, so which is where we were getting engaged from originally when we started the firefight at the other location. And I saw others to the back left, which is where I was going. So I was pushing up along the back left. I got into some really good cover, and I saw where they were peeking. They were peeking around the backside of the building. So I suppressed the wall. My guys were going down. Like I was watching my friends just with red rags like next to me. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be the last one here? What am I going to do now because I'm by myself? So my friends were calling out to me, trying to figure out where I was. I was just giving them one word responses quickly so that I wasn't telegraphing where I was too much to the other team. And I was able to push super aggressive to the left out wide, and I was able to clear out the entire back part of the building. I think I killed like 3 guys back there, which was all of them. We were able to get our teammates up. They revived. We got to the location, took pictures of the evidence, and detonated. And we had one more to do before we left, but we had about 5 minutes. I'd say maybe 8 minutes. And we went, okay, how are we going to do this? Because we just wiped out this team. They're probably going to go respawn there. Okay, let's go. Let's take a look. So we pulled up to the location, and we're trying to figure out where it is through the woods, because this one is particularly obscure. It's off the road, and you kind of got to know where you're going to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
When we pull up, and they are already in fortified positions, already prone, suppressing us. We don't really know exactly where we're getting shot from, and we're not in a good location. So we made the call. Let's say, we accomplished these 2. Let's get out of here. Let's extract with no casualties leaving on the field. We've still accomplished part of the mission. We haven't accomplished the third part, but at least we're getting out alive and we're not failing the mission. So we decided to pull out of there, cut our losses, because it wasn't a good situation to take. And that actually hurt a bit, because in my head I was like, okay, well, we can do this. We could totally do this, but we were against two opponents. It was the enemies and time. And
Yeah.
we could beat one. We're probably not going to beat the other, because if we got up there, we were probably going to run out of time before getting to extract. So we said, all right, we had taken, I think, 2 more people down on our team. We revived ourselves and we just turned and got out of there. Tactical retreat. It worked and I feel really good about it, but it sucks in the moment. And I feel like it's a difficult thing to cope with until you realize that we still accomplished our mission and we didn't get stuck there. We didn't fail because we didn't get out.
Well, it's interesting because you were saying at the start, like the game organizer is telling you, like, you have no command, right? This is literally, it's up to you to figure it out. And so, big boy rules, right? Game time decision. You see the situation that's in front of you and you make the call. Like, obviously, that's not the best possible outcome, but I would say it's also not the worst possible outcome. The worst possible outcome is you weren't able to complete the mission and you all died, right? You all were not able to even extract. I mean, like, if it was real money on the line, what would you do? You'd probably cut your losses, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a logical choice, but I mean, obviously it's a game, so you kind of want to win. But even the fact that you got that far is already partially a win. I mean, in my books, like, maybe you lost in overtime, so you still got 1 point instead of 2. I don't know, right?
Well, and there were outside factors too. So if we didn't extract, that's essentially like we failed all aspects of the mission. If we didn't get picked up, we're essentially left in the enemy territory. Like, we're dead. We missed our window. All right, nobody's coming to help you. You're done. That's on us. By doing what we did, and we weighed this. We looked around. We were already down medic bands. Like, I got pulled out on like a last medic band that we had. We didn't really have an option. If one more of us went down, the mission would essentially be failed, because we couldn't. We had a dead player. Like, we had a dead guy, and I mean, I wouldn't say it's a mission success if we take a casualty in the meantime. Yeah, that doesn't sound good to me. So, yeah, it was absolutely the right decision to make. If we would have had 45 minutes instead of 30, we would have had enough time for sure, because we would have had like 15 minutes to maneuver on the position, figure out what we're walking into. But when you're on a time crunch, you kind of just got to go. You got to make it up on the fly. And as we've said before, a plan never makes it past first contact. Well, when you don't have a plan, or you have a kind of idea and you get into that first contact, and it gets even worse, because now you're like, all right, well, now your communication's cut off. Now you're in the middle of a firefight. People are distracted. It's really difficult in that situation to make the call, but we did, and we got out.
So I want to talk about the last 2 missions now in a second, but I want to take a pause and talk about physicality. So obviously, an event like this, like you're you're going half an hour, and then you've got, to your point, half an hour break technically, but it's more like 15 minutes really. And it doesn't sound like you're just, it's not, you're not playing on postage stamps, right? These are large AOs. How did you find your physicality um rose to the occasion, or not as case? Like, did you find it hard to be, by this point you're into this game for 2.5 hours or whatever, you're humping all of your gear, um and like you said, you have 30 minutes, which means you probably are not just sauntering through the woods, like you're probably trying to go at a good clip. How did you find all that worked out for you on the day of? I'm not trying to say you're not a healthy individual. I'm just saying, like, just in general, like, what should people expect, right?
Absolutely. So for this particular event, it was very the day portion was difficult. The night portion was more difficult because it adds in the darkness and the cold factor. But add into the fact that we were playing this in cold weather, everything was much more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Carrying stuff was more difficult. Walking on the ground was more difficult. The AO itself is not an easy place to walk in generally. There's lots of environmental hazards that you can get yourself into while having to move quick. So yes, we were sweating and we were getting real hot. I had to, something that I picked up for this event prior to going out, I picked up a merino wool base layer and I picked up like a micro puff coat, which I had never really heard that term before, but it's like a winter coat, but very, very small. So you can wear it underneath something as opposed as like an outer layer. So I had picked that up in a merino wool base layer. I was wearing a Under Armour cold layer underneath it, and it's cold out. So you're like, oh, it's nice, but as soon as you start moving, you get super sweaty and hot, and you got to start shedding layers. So we were very active. There was very little downtime in those, and it was pretty much go, go, go in between each section. 15 minutes felt like 8, and those 8 minutes felt like you didn't have any time once it
Yeah.
started going. So since it was short sections, it wasn't so bad. It's not like we were running across the field, but when you had to actually get up and hoof it, you were moving. And full on sprint getting down the road before you run out of time type of thing. I would say that this was not a typically our very challenging AO terrain wise, because it's mostly flat. There is some elevation changes, but mostly flat. But it's definitely a test of like, hey, if you're not able to at least move quickly through the woods, not full sprint, but if you're having a hard time just briskly walking through stuff, through environmental hazards, because that takes out a lot, you'll probably have a bit of a challenge with this because you can't slow down enough to wait for that. There's no time to sit down and have a 3-minute break. If you're out of breath, that sucks, man. You got to keep going for this.
Yeah. So let's talk about mission 4.
This was the most difficult mission that we had.
Though that one, the last one, wasn't difficult.
That was difficult. That was very difficult. I'd like to attribute this mission being especially difficult due to me knowing the enemy players on the other team. So shout out to Ruben and his brother Luke, who were playing red team. They are natives of Maine, and they play at these fields. This is like their home field, so they know this place like the back of their hand. They know everywhere to go, everywhere you could go. Very difficult to play against. When you think of like the home team that will give you a hard time every time, it's these guys. These guys are always like that. So this mission was to infiltrate the center building, which is called the MAC building. It's like a big command center with like an overlook tower and everything. Get in there. We were supposed to grab the codes. I believe it was for a laptop. We were supposed to hack into the laptop, grab information. At the same time, we were supposed to hit the barracks. And to give this context, the MAC building is a huge building, and it's surrounded by chain link fence. Besides chain link fence, there's really not any cover. So once you exit that building, it's chain link fence and then open woods. And there's a road between the barracks and the MAC building that's probably about 150 feet. That it's the quickest way, but if there's somebody in either of those buildings, you're going to die. There's no cover to take it all. Mm-hmm. So the idea was get into the MAC building, get the laptop with the information, get into the barracks, get the information that we needed from the barracks, and extract. But there was an alarm in this section. And this was an alarm that was out in the open that they could hit at any time. So we were trying to sneak our way up, and I will take most of the fault for this part. The whole section we were trying to walk through was very, very muddy. This is a section that you can go to and get stuck up to your waist and like lose stuff that you don't want to lose into a thing of mud. I never ever want to lose a boot and then step without a boot on. That sounds horrible, and
yeah, really.
bother me a lot if I ever had to do that. So we were trying to avoid the big mud pit that was essentially the entire road. It was about 250 feet up just straight mud that we had to avoid. So we took a quick route that was just outside of it. But in doing so, we were spotted by Ruben's group, which were the National Guards at this point, that were overlooking our area. And they played this particularly difficult, where they spotted us and they would not leave us alone. They spotted us, they came out to our position, they hung around where we were, and they were just killing our time the entire time. So from the first spot to when we got to move again, it was probably about 12 minutes. So they spotted us, and then we were in position. We couldn't really move because they were right on top of us, like looking for us, and we couldn't move. So we finally got up to be able to move. I think at that point they had spotted us twice, and we finally got away. We moved on to the next section. We were going to cut in up high to come in through the Mac building from the side, and they were watching that area. So they spotted us one more time, and they turned on the alarm. So the alarm went off, they mobilized, they started just freely engaging us with no questions asked. They just started raining down fire on us, and we were in a really, really bad position. I think 3 of us had gone down, and we were just in no position to fight. We couldn't. It was a bad spot to be able to engage from. And I think we had about 3 minutes left, and we said, all right, we got to get out of here. But the only way out of here without moving into the neighboring zone is to walk essentially right through where they all were. We didn't really have a good option. So after getting just rained down BBs on, they were just, from a high up position. We didn't have any good angles, and really we didn't want to shoot the National Guard because that would fail our mission too. Not something that we wanted to do. So instead, I got revived, and one of my guys got revived. Will was down right in front of me. He got shot from a ridiculous angle that I'm sure he's still upset about because he was like, how did this guy even hit me? Like, I don't even know where he was. There's no way. And we were getting shot at, and I saw we were getting shot at. It was probably from about 200 feet away from a window. So I took aim and I said, listen, guys, when I start shooting, you got to start going. So I start suppressing the window, and I watched him from where he was take cover. And I was like, go. So they started moving. As soon as I was done the suppression, I started moving as well. And we just tried to hightail it out the top end. And we got pretty damn far. We were just about to extract when 4 of my guys died in front of me out in the middle of the open road. And I went, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And I look at the watch. We probably had about a minute left. And I said, guys, I'm going to come get you. We got to get out. The school where we were extracting was right there, probably about 75 feet away. I said, got to go. We got to go now. So I ran out into the woods. I suppressed, and then they took cover, and I ran out into, not the woods, into the road, and I threw a medic band on one guy. He threw a medic band on another. And then the guy that he got revived went behind me and grabbed the last guy, and we just dragged him into the woods. Got up to the school with probably, I'd say 20 seconds left at this point. And we looked at Gordon. We were like, do we need to be in the school? Because there was like a wall in between us and being inside. And he said, yes. So we all scaled over this wall, like giving our guns to each other and just climbing over. And we got in. He's like, you guys got all 5 there? And we were like, yep. And he went, good. And he went, phase is over. So we all extracted from that phase. We didn't accomplish the mission, which was getting the intel, because there were some particularly pesky National Guard units in play at that point. And afterwards, he's like, man, listen. I'm like, wow, you were playing on like Ultra Nightmare Hard mode, seeing us like through bushes from like 300 feet away. He's like, yeah, sometimes I felt like we were being too easy on the last phases. So we wanted to give you guys like a good fight. I'm like, sure, man, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not upset about it. It was funny, but it was difficult. It was kind of more like what you'd expect from a ridiculous video game, where they spot you from forever away, and then they immediately just start walking to you, no matter how far away you were. But we extracted. We didn't leave anybody behind. We got out alive. We got to move on to the final phase of the first section. So I can go right into that.
Let's go right into it. Yeah.
So last phase that we were in, there was a man of, I think he was supposed to be like a priest or some sort of doctor or something, and he was moving in between these 2 locations, which was a cemetery, and I think the other location was called Castle. There were 2 options that he could be at. What we had to do is we had to find him, get him to the tent. So similar to the other one, get him to a tent and ask him questions. find out what information he has, and then get out. But of course, there was National Guards, and this was another alarm section. So we're sitting in there like, do we know what this guy looks like? And all the guy says to us is, no. He said, no. I went, okay. And he's like, I think you'll know him when you see him. So we look through the woods, and we see this guy just wearing all red and white, like long red and white, almost like a high priestess type of look.
Yeah, okay.
Everything besides like a big hat on top. And I'm like, okay, cool. I think we see him, and we saw him before the face started just like meandering through the woods, and we're like, okay, this seems too easy. Like, what's the catch? Why can we see him right now? So we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, and we say, okay, well, we could go to this location, which is to our left, or we could go to this location to our right, which is where he's supposed to be, or we could just go right at him. And we very clearly see him right now. So we said, okay, screw it. Let's go right at him. Let's see what happens. And we'll go from there. So we see him. He's praying at the cemetery. We get into a position where we're ready to snatch him. And some guard that's playing on Ultra Nightmare Hard mode calls us out and immediately starts firing. Not like I think I see something over there. And then they go to check it out. It was contact. And they just started laying out fire on us. And at first I'm like, oh, there's no way they saw us, because Matt was like, are they on us? And I said, no, there's no way they're not on us. And then Matt got hit and he died right in front of me. And he's like, damn it, Jordan. And I'm like, how was I supposed to know? We didn't get a warning at all. I've come to find out after the mission, it was because we were moving so aggressively when the guards spotted us that they immediately thought we were a threat and started engaging us immediately, as opposed to like, oh, what are those people doing over there? So shot ourselves in the foot with that. But I was now in a position to engage the National Guard. And the rules of this were either you don't engage the National Guard, you don't kill any of them, because that's a failure point. If you kill them and they find a body, then you lose that round. It's a failure of the mission. Kill the National Guard in their entirety, or kill them and hide their bodies so that people that are walking around won't find them. So there were three options, all of which involve violence. We were in a position now which needed violence in order to solve the problem that we were dealing with. So I'm up in a position, very, very good position. I have a pretty much like a big camo netted block next to me. And I'm watching the National Guard walk up onto Will. And I said to Will, like, you got to go now. Go now. I will suppress them. Get up to the priest. At least get in there. And he said, okay, he's going. So I turn out and I start suppressing where I think they are. And there's 4 National Guard guys directly in front of me. One of them sees me, takes cover, and he peeks out wide, like a very, very wide peek. Like if I missed my shot, I was going to die. So he's peeking out super wide, and I luckily hit him and immediately turned my attention to my immediate left, probably about 50 feet away from me, where there was a dug-in trench, and eliminated the guy that was in the trench that was looking right at me. So I went, okay, that's 2 down. Where are the rest of the guys? Just behind him, we got more guards coming investigate. Of course, there's no alarm that's been hit yet. They're still actively in the engagement with us. So I let them walk in a little bit closer, and I took out the last 2 National Guard in like one more burst of my LMG. Didn't see anybody else. Extracted the priest to the tents, but then we're there with the bodies. I have no idea how many National Guards there actually are. There could be 4 more. There could be no more. We don't know. So I'm holding a position, overwatching the guards, and I have Edgar and Matt come up and grab these guys and go and hide the bodies. So I'm sitting there holding a position watching. Matt goes and grabs 2 of them. Edgar comes up and grabs 2 of them, and they literally just take them and like put them in a bush, like somewhere behind me. Like, you know, in video games when you hide a body, it's like you just take them and you just throw them into something, and then they're just like there. Well, these are people that are obviously alive, so you can't just do that.
Yeah, really.
And so I'm overwatching, I'm watching the position, and I turn around and I see the 4 after, like, all right, we're good. And there's just like 4 guys just like standing next to this bush. And the game runner comes over, the briefer that talked to us, and he's like, so we're just not able to play now? And I'm like, well, you told us that we were supposed to hide them, right? And he's like, yes. And you definitely hid those guys. So they're out of play. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't know if there's more guys, but we're going to continue our mission. So I think those guys were a little bit upset that we actually took them and hid them instead of leaving them dead. But if we would have left them, they could have respawned.
Yeah,
and then we would have had to deal with them again. So in my head, it's like, all right, we'll hide them, and they can't respawn, and their other teammates can't find them. It's just a win-win. And that was part of our mission. They told us to hide them. So I said, okay. So we get to the priest after the interrogation. He says, all right, we have there's a book inside Castle. I need you to go find it for me and bring it to me. So that was the initial place. So we walked over to Castle, got there really quick. It was down a valley and then back up, super, super steep. I think this is one of like the 5 times that Will wiped out into like a forward roll to recover. Pretty cool falls. If it would have been me, I would have broken something, either me or my gun.
Definitely.
Because
Yeah,
that's
right
always
there
what
with
happens. Yep. It's always what happens. But so we get up to Castle, find the book. We have I think we actually had like 12 minutes left or something. We had a lot of time. We brought the book back to the priest, and then we said, okay, what else do we have? And he said, nothing. That's it. So we just said, okay, let's get the hell out of here. So we go and we extract. And the briefer comes over to us and he says, first of all, great job. Secondly, that was the most kinetic that I've seen this situation play out, where you had to immediately engage the targets. And that was the first time, I think he said that was the first time that I've seen a full-on engagement turn out in the player's favor. Like everybody else that had gotten into an engagement, I think they had taken a casualty or something. They failed some part of the mission. But he's like, that was the quickest, most violent way that I've seen that mission played, and you guys did it. And it was awesome. And I'm like, awesome, man. This feels great. Because I didn't realize how quickly it happened until we look back at the time. It's like, wow, we still got 10 minutes left. Normally, we're still like in the heat of the battle at this point, like trying to do the last part of the mission. But we did bang, bang. They're all dead. Extract. And we were gone.
Yeah, you can just walk to the extract. You'll be fine, right?
Pretty much. We walked over to the extract, and there was another phase going on in front of us, and the National Guard guy's just sitting there going like, hey. And we're just like, hey, because he's not in our phase, so we can't actually fight with him. And the briefer's just like, yeah, if you guys want to just like wait a few minutes because their phase is still going, just like don't walk through there. So we're like, okay, cool. But that was the end of like the day phase. So overall, in the day phase, we accomplished 4 out of our 5 missions in either entirety or almost entirety without taking casualties that were left on the field. And the only mission that we failed was one that we still extracted on without taking any casualties and leaving people behind. So
right,
we were super proud of that. Super, super proud of it because it was not easy.
Yeah. You're definitely you're rising to the occasion, let's call it, right? You have challenges in front of you. So when I was reading the warning order, it says basically that whichever cell did the best, essentially, succeeded the most, then became the lead for Joint Task Force Warlock. Which was basically the final mission, right? Which is like which they describe as a 0 Dark 30 style mission. So can you talk about how all of that went down? Because I guess there would have been a break in between, or did you finish basically at night? How did all that work?
So we finished still during the day, but something to remember, and it wasn't mentioned, we haven't talked about it. It might have been in the warrant order. This event was at 2 fields. So the day portion was at Harris. The night portion was at Cole's family farm. So after you finished the day portion, you had about an hour to get from location to location, even though it was about a 5-minute drive. You had to pack up your stuff, get over there, and get ready for the night portion. This ended up taking a little bit more time because they had to turn down the field at Harris and bring some props over to Cole's location. So I think it was about, it turned into like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of wait time in between. But once we got there, we started setting up, staged our gear. It was cold now. It was like definitely 30 degrees, if not colder, but there was no sun. It was windy. It was not a fun time to play airsoft.
Yeah.
And there was only, I believe, 13 people from our original 25 that actually came over and played at this field. So it went from having 5 squads of 5 to having 2 full squads. Maybe it was 14 people. It was almost 3 cells, but it wasn't 3 cells. So either 13 or 14 people, now versus an entire full strength red team, which was like 21 people, either 20 or 21 people. So now we were at a serious disadvantage, not to mention red team is very often wearing night vision. At almost every single event, almost everybody on the red team is wearing night vision. So we're going into this night portion where there is no moon. It's just stars. It's kind of clear, but so at least we have starlight, but no actual light with us. And we had lost almost half of the group that we were playing with, and now we were going into essentially an uphill battle against the entirety of the ESOE forces on this night field. So some people, I don't know exactly what happened, but there was literally like full squads that were just gone. Like we saw them during the day, and then we got to the night field, and they just were not there. And it's like, okay, I guess just leave us here to do it. I mean, we're gonna do it anyways, but wow, like that, what happened? I don't know where you guys
Yeah,
went.
yeah,
Like
really.
maybe it was too cold or somebody got hurt or something. But it was like Gordon looked around. He's like, "Is this it? Like, where is everybody?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that whole squad just left." We were like, "Oh," and I think Gordon was like, "Well, I guess I'm sorry for taking so long, like in between or something like that." But nevertheless, we got into the night portion. Gordon gave us a briefing. Essentially, what it was, we had a 2 hour, was supposed to be a 2 hour hard stop for this next phase, which was find the leader of the ESOE and eliminate him. Essentially, that's what it was. But it's nighttime. They're all wearing all black. How do you identify this guy? So they threw some blue lights on him and said, if you find him, he has like some blue lights. He has some new bling, is what they called it.
Okay.
But they had unlimited respawns, and where this guy was located was in a fortified position near where their unlimited respawns were. So our task, what we were given with, was first we had to get onto the field and establish a fob, establish a CP somewhere where we could respawn. Of course, we didn't get there easily. That's how it goes. They were already there waiting for us. And secondly, we needed to then eliminate their spawn and eliminate the main head of the ESOE forces. So we, of course, were like, okay, well, we want to get up and eliminate their spawn. And there was only 4 of us. One of our guys had to go home for a family emergency, so we were down to 4 instead of 5. But when we had talked about like how are we going to eliminate this, Gordon said, okay, with pyro, you can throw it into the building. If you do that, it will be declared that the spawn has been burned down. He's like, but let's do this. He gave us a road flare instead. And he said, if you light this flare and put it inside the building, you'll essentially burn it down and it'll be like a beacon for everybody to see that spawn is now gone. Mind you, it is dark. It is very dark. You could see only when you're standing up because you could see trees in the distance, but in front of you, very, very difficult to see. Our eyes adjusted pretty well, but there were thermals and night vision on the enemy team, which became extremely apparent very fast once we started to get into some engagements. Pretty much what happened was it was my 4 guys. We had another full squad. I believe they were a group called Dark Detachment, which is like out of Massachusetts. They got invited to the event as well. And what we wanted to do is this field is essentially shaped like there's a lot more to the field, but the area that we're playing at is an elevated position, and then about a football field's area of pine trees that they're growing, I'm assuming for Christmas trees. And they is pretty much wide open, and all you have for cover is like those pine trees every couple of feet. And our mission when we talked to command was to get up and destroy the enemy spawn. And we had to locate the enemy spawn. There was 2 places it could have been. It was, I think they said it was at Adams, but of course we've only played at this field 1 time ever, and it was like 6 months ago when the season started. So we don't even know
and
where we are.
Probably in the daytime. Right?
Yes, it was daytime, and now it's night. So we're trying to figure out where we are. And essentially we got to this location. We staged out of a tent. We said, okay, we're setting up a fob here. It was down in the field, but in like the far right corner. And Gordon was next to us with some night vision on, and he was pointing out some places to Matt. And he said, all right, this is where you want to go. I think it's right over here. Get up there, burn down the tower. They won't be able to respawn. It's easier said than done, of course, because you're fighting against people that now they are not playing the video game version of them. Like they are actively trying their hardest to kill you like all day long. Because they had to hold back a little bit because they had to play the scenario earlier. But I'm pretty sure Gordon just said, hands off, give these guys hell and don't make it easy on them. So playing against guys with night vision again, we pulled a midsummer. We got across the field and we hit the dirt. And we crawled probably another 200 feet up the side of this hill. Just hit the dirt the entire time. And about 200 feet in, I think a thermal must have spotted us, and we just saw tracers just start hailing in over our position, and we stayed prone that whole time. So if somebody did see us, they had a really good eye. But we started taking fire. We ran up the hill, got into some pine trees, and got into a huge firefight. Where afterwards we realized we were right near where their spawn was. We were like 30 feet away from their spawn. If we would have just crested the hill and thrown a grenade, we would have eliminated their spawn. So huge firefight ensues. We finally all go down. We went, okay, let's go respawn. So we go and respawn, come back again in the pitch black, this time moving with an entire group, and we're in the middle of the woods. getting suppressed while we're crossing the field. And we said, okay, well, what are we going to do? We said, we just need to hit the tree line again. Something that we learned from Midsummer, and something that Matt has been trying to tell us all the time. When you start getting fired at and they're in the woods, you need to get up to the woods. No matter where you are, you can't just go prone where you are. Like, you got to move up and get into a position. Because if you've ever played, I mean, and you played in the woods many times, when you're standing outside the woods and people are in the woods, especially if they're in the shade, it's like you're looking through a window when it's light outside.
Yeah.
When you look into there, it's like dark, like you can't see anything. But when you get up to the base of that, you can actually start seeing stuff, because they're like no longer in the shade, and that's amplified at nighttime as well. So we said, okay, well, what do we have to do? We got up to the base of the hill again. I mean, this time we crawled again up the base of that hill, probably about another 200 feet. And this time we got up there without being spotted. So we got up to the position. We looked around and we don't know where we are. And we look to our right and we're like, all right, we must have missed the base. We must have missed the base or the spot. We don't know where we are. And then we're like, okay, I guess we'll continue walking up the road, and we turn our backs and the base is like right behind us. So as we go across the road, before we know the base is there, we get flashed by a flashlight as we're in the center of the road crossing, because we're about to start walking to the right. And we turn around and Matt's like, the base is there, man. It's right there. So we start getting flashed by these flashlights probably about 75 feet away from us, and they just start unloading on us. So we get into cover really quick, and we take that position. I think there were 2 guys inside of there, and we had thrown a frag in. And I think Will threw the frag, and it killed both of them. I was inside the position. And we were like, wow, we were much closer to this spot than we thought we were, because we had no idea where we were when we finally crested the hill. We didn't see the base. That's how dark it was. So we got over there, lit the road flare, put it down, and we had eliminated the ESOE's respawn. So none of the guys on the field could respawn anymore. They were only on the medic bands that they had. So we turned our attention up the hill to where we last seen the leader of it. He had like the blue lights on his gun, and that was where the final like full-on assault was happening. So we're moving up the hill. We're dodging spotlights. I think they were using infrared and regular spotlights, because when the light would turn off, they said this happened in Midsummer, the light would turn off, the fog, like the floodlight, but then they would have an infrared fog light that was also going off. So guys with nods would see you like no problem. We didn't know that at Midsummer, but we knew that this time, that's probably something that they were going to use. So we were once again on the ground, crawling across, which, as we've now found out at 2 events, crawling is incredibly effective at night. So effective as long as you're staying low to the ground. Because most of the time you're looking for that shadow in the distance that's going tree to tree. When that shadow is not there going tree to tree and breaking silhouette, it's very difficult to see until you start getting fired upon with tracers or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. So we're pushing up to the base of the house. We get up there. There's a full-on firefight going on. There's nades going over the walls, everything. We said, we just got to go up there. So we got up to the very top. I think Matt had schwacked a guy that was out back that was hiding with nods. And the guy, after he got shot, was like, damn, nice shot, man. And I was like, good stuff, Matt. Like, let's go. Like, let's freaking go, man. So we said, all right, let's push up. We got up to the outside of the base, threw a nade in. Everybody was dead inside, and we walked in. We didn't kill them with the nade. Somebody else had killed them. Walked inside, and the leader of the ESOE was dead inside the base, which I don't think Gordon knew, because that would have ended the game, I think, if Gordon would have known that he was dead. And somebody was like, hey, somebody should take a picture of him and tell Gordon. So one of the staff members that had actually, we were inside the base, Edgar died outside, and somebody snuck right up inside and like wiped out 4 of us before dying himself. I think he traded. But at that point, the game was already over. It just hadn't been called.
Right.
And then he's like, all right, let me tell Gordon that our leader is dead. So he called Gordon, told him the leader was dead, and then Index was called. And we had successfully accomplished the night mission of, we could have just did it just by killing the main leader of the ESOE, but we also eliminated their respawn points, so they had diminished numbers and no reinforcements. And then we killed the head of the ESOE. So super, super proud of the way we did it. It felt very reminiscent of Midsummer. And if I was to say, out of all the events this year, this is number 2 only to Midsummer. This is the closest to what Midsummer felt like out of any of the other events that we played this year. And I speak so highly of Midsummer because the event makes you feel like you're part of it, like you have a purpose. When we stepped onto the field at night, that was not in phase form. It was just like, all right, here comes the exercise that we're about to do. It felt like we were back in Midsummer again. It felt like we were back again fighting
Yeah.
against the force that didn't want us there, that knew the field. In some cases they did, and they were extremely difficult to fight. Even our first fight getting to our first CP was difficult, which I actually didn't describe at all, but we walk up to there, we're getting to the CP, they tell us, all right, follow the light. And as we're walking this trail, a grenade lands right in the middle of the trail and wipes out like 5 guys right in front of us. So we hit the dirt, it's pitch black, we can't see anything, and Matt is having us do bounding movement up the trees, just like we did before at Midsummer through the Wicker. This time it was a lot more open and scary because I couldn't see anything. And we bounding movement up to the building, and we were able to clear out the CP. I think it was us 4 that got into the building first. Able to clear it out, secure our respawn point, and that's where the mission started. So sorry to backtrack on that. I just forgot that was also a super cool moment.
Legit.
Like,
I think there's so much in these types of events. Like, it's hard. I mean, we've been talking for a lot longer than typically we do on this podcast, which is totally fun because there's a lot to cover. Like, one of the things that of course is missing is what about everybody else's experience, right? Because you can only provide your experience, but like you have basically another 5 sets of these similar stories from different people. So I think the format of this kind of event is really, really cool. And I also think, this isn't an event like, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, like people think, oh, our community is small, we can't do events, right? But really, you're talking about 50 people, right? 25,
yeah.
right? Like, and probably not quite that much. You're right,
yeah.
But it's like 5 teams of 5, and then game staff or whatever. Like, there are a lot of communities where that is a totally achievable number. And to be honest, it doesn't even need to be 25 and 25. You could do 3 different fields with 3 cells of 5 people. Like, it's very scalable in that way. And I think it's a really cool format for a game to make sure that people get the opportunity to experience different styles of play, but also in a really challenging way. I mean, you don't have to make it quite as nightmare hard as some of the stuff that you were describing in this last episode, but certainly saying, hey, we want to do a person of interest, we want to do recovering whatever. Like, you can do that in a bite-sized format where it's like, hey, it's 45 minutes, really, right? It's 45 minutes. You get 15 minutes briefing, 30 minutes, get out there, right? Now, if I think about our local like open, which is 3 hours on the weekend, you could do 3 of those, right, in that same time frame. And if you have multiple games going at the same time, well, you could do 9 of them, right? Let's say you do 3 games per slot, then you're doing 9. Like, there's a lot of potential here for this style of game for a lot of different communities. So it's really encouraging to hear. And by the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like the fact that you only had so few players really minimized anything about your experience, right?
No, it's funny now that I think about it. The 2 events that I enjoyed the most this year were the 2 smallest events that we played at. One, it was, I think, 40 of us versus like 22 red team members when we were at Midsummer. And this one being less than 50 people that we're playing at. We were at events that had 150 on each team, and then it's like 300 people on the field. And those are cool if you want to shoot and get shot. It's a fun event to play, right? These events have like a deeper feeling to them. And something I want to mention before I forget, we were reading through the Warno, and if you read through the Warno like you did, there was no explanation about weapons classes, how many weapons can be in a group, right? What type of weapons, how many of them. So we were looking through it, and our idea was, well, you know what? We're a tier 1 unit. That's what we're supposed to be portraying. People that make our own rules, that kit up for the situation that they're going to be present in. What's to stop us from running 4 saws and 1 SMG? What's to stop us from running 5 saws all with select fire? If that's what we determine is going to be the most effective in our given situation for this event, what is stopping us from doing it? And the more that I think about it, the more the freedom that this event provided to say, hey, this is the situation you're walking into. Prepare what you think you will need to be successful at this, and giving you the freedom of that, obviously within reason. Like, if there was like 4, I mean, I guess there could be 5 miniguns and nobody would say anything about it. It would be weird, but you could do it. But the responsibility that was given to us, it was like, hey, this is a big boy game. Come in here, make the right choices, make the right decisions. It gave us the responsibility that we not necessarily feel limited by at other events, but it was another aspect of, wow, this is what do I need to do to make this event work? What do I need to do to make sure that our team is successful? And a huge aspect of this event was you cannot blame other people for your failure. When you are a cell of 5 and that is your cell of 5, man, if you fail that mission, that is all your fault.
Yeah.
It's 100% your fault. You can't be like, well, my teammates did this and I wish that team over there was suppressing when they weren't. Like, it would have been so useful for us. This is a thing that I've taken from competitive games when I used to play. When you focus on what other people are doing and you start blaming what other people are doing as a source of your failure, that is when you stop improving. It is an immediate detriment to the improving of yourself as a person and skill-wise. This eliminates that. It lets you be like, all right, listen, if we fail this is our fault. It's nobody else's. Even if somebody else sets off an alarm, how do we adapt to that? How do we adapt to that situation? Just because they set off the alarm doesn't mean that it's their fault we lost. If we can't handle the adaptation of what we need to do, that's still on us. And that was such a cool aspect of this. And probably my favorite aspect of this event was, hey, you 5 are on your own. I'm going to give you the situation, but you have to go out and figure it out. You got to figure it out.
And I think that's such good advice, and it's such a strong place to sort of end our conversation, because really, like, when it comes down to it, blaming other people for the things that go wrong in your game, whether it's airsoft, whether it's chess or anything else, right? Yeah, like, there's some degree of responsibility in that they are playing against you, so fair enough. But like, you are in control of how you come prepared, your own mindset, your own physicality, your own equipment, like all of that, and how you respond to a situation that you are given that is not what you expected is also part of your skill set, right? You can't control what anybody else is going to do. You can only control what you're going to do, what you're prepared to do, what you've practiced, what you've trained, etc. Now, obviously, going the other way, like, you don't want to sit there and be like, "Oh, I suck. It's nobody else's fault. I'm the worst." Obviously, that's not productive either, right? But it's part of what we've talked about on this channel and these podcasts for so long, which is you have to be able to self-evaluate critically and say, okay, did that work? And if it did, like, and you had games where you guys rocked it, great. But I'm sure there's still takeaways for you where you're like, oh, that could have been better, or we could have. And then there's others where you're like, wow, that did not go to plan. And then you adapted, and I come back to this because I know that you said it doesn't feel good at the time, but in that third game you adapted, you extracted all your dudes, you got 66% of the way there, like, that's awesome, right? And I think I've seen this attitude on the airsoft field before, not very often, thankfully, but it's like, oh, well, everything sucked and none of it is my fault. And it's like, no, it sucked. It was difficult, and your attitude's not helping that either, right? So I totally take that, because I think it's such an important part, and it's also an important part, I think, of making sure that people actually enjoy themselves. Because if you're going out there and you're thinking, oh, well, I'm not having any fun at airsoft because everybody is better than me and I can't do anything, and it's not my fault, I'm doing my best, but I always suck, I always lose, like, that's not fun. Like, take some ownership and figure out, like, okay, what am I going to do this time, right? So yeah, I'm glad that lesson's coming nice, shining through for you guys at StagOps, for sure.
Absolutely. And the final thing, because the main part of the after action review is like, what could they do better next time? Man, I'd be hard pressed to say that there was really anything in their control that they could have actively done better. They kept the event a surprise. We learned about stuff on the fly. We had to adapt to the situation. It had the feeling of, you are responsible for your own choices here. Make the right ones and you'll succeed. Past some annoyances, specifically with Ruben's team when they were playing us on Ultra Nightmare mode, which was 100% their choice and part of the game. I'm not actually complaining about that. I really had no actual issues with this event. This was my favorite. If there's anything to take from this, those story events where you actually have a real scenario where you're playing out a given mission and pushing a narrative, those are my favorite things. When you have a purpose and you know why you're there, this is why we are here doing this, and you have the context behind it, it makes a world of a difference rather than going out and playing shooty bang bang man, in the woods with your friends. It is a totally different experience, and that is what this is. It was not an airsoft game. It was not an airsoft event. It was an airsoft experience, and that is what has gone through both of these. Midsummer, Autumn Justice, with the storyline, they're trying to do more things like that. It was not the same as this, obviously, a lot more people, but my key takeaway from this is, if StagOps is going to look to improve, model more stuff off of Midsummer, model more stuff off of Scapegoat, model more stuff off of the storyline based, very deep lore stuff. Or, if you are doing that, make sure that the information is getting to the players in the right way. Because when you have a meaning behind it, rather than go assault this position for the fourth time in a row, it becomes so much more enjoyable, at least for me. And I know my guys, we
Yeah.
loved those events more than any other event that we did this year. And I'm really hoping that we can do more like this next year, more storyline based events, more immersion based events, and overall just having a great time and not just playing airsoft. That was the
Yeah,
best
man.
part.
Well, listen, it's always so good to have you on the podcast. I mean, your enthusiasm for these types of events is infectious. Hearing you talk about this really makes me want to come down and play a game like that. But I mean, I'm saving all my resources for Iron Horse, as
Yep.
we've talked about before. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for doing that. I hope that the organizer from StagOps maybe get a chance to listen to this episode and they can hear sort of your perspective firsthand, because that as a game organizer myself, these kinds of experiences are so valuable. So thanks for taking the time, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to check out more pictures from the event, you want to talk to Jordan about his experiences, join the Discord. The link is in the description. But that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.